Okay, so this one is about the nature of trust. So I want to talk about trust in context of ternary thinking, and through the lens of seeking to design an over-unity system or a ternary system that is trustless. Meaning that if it is trustless, it can be entirely trusted, which is the ternary perspective, which is paradox. So if that's confused you, don't worry, it'll become even more confusing shortly. So the nature of trust. I've spoken about trust in many other podcasts. I think I've done an episode on it, but I could be wrong. But I want to look at it through this lens. So trust basically means that you are delegating authority to someone or something. You are consciously giving your power away to someone or something. And the level of trust that you have is in relation to your certainty around the capability and capacity of that third party, whether it is something or someone, to fulfill the obligation. That's it. You can summarize it like that in a nutshell. Now, if something is devoid of obligation, so if there is no obligation involved, then trust is not required. So if I have $100 and I give you $100 and there's no strings attached, meaning it's obligation free, it's a gift. There are no conditions upon which you have to utilize that $100. You see? And so trust it doesn't matter. Here's $100, you can burn it. You can spend it on KFC. You can spend it on alcohol. You can spend it on whatever you want. It's obligation free. It's a gift. But if I give you $100 and there are strings attached, then trust is required. So if trust is required, that means there has to be an obligation. I'm giving you this $100 upon the condition that X, Y, Z, A, B, C, so that D, E, F, G, H, I. Do you agree? And yes, I agree. Please sign here. The signature is put in place and there's an agreement. Now, that's not enough to create absolute trust. There may be varying degrees of trust based on the system in place. So did I entrust that $100 to a charitable trust that has a constitution or a deed that bonds the purpose of that trust to specific obligations that I'm aligned with? Check. Yes, it does. Okay, cool. So I have a level of trust. Okay, who are the trustees? Okay, I can see this is the trustee. Here's their LinkedIn profile. And I can see they have great recommendations from people who are well known in the industry I'm playing in. And so I have even more trust. And so this is the linchpin and the key component of entrustment is reputation. So a system is only as trustless as the reputation of the human beings involved in the system. So if I have a hybrid system, it is some of its capability and capacity is derived from a digital system, and some of it is derived by human custody or decision making. then it's only as useful or trustless as its weakest link. And so in context of, let's say a centralized marketplace on a distributed network, and with 1 billion users, human beings. And let's say those human beings are all capable of exchanging or transacting anonymously. Now, that's a system that can't be trusted. It's not possible. You cannot trust it entirely because there are human beings involved. So how do you turn something like that into a trustless system? Well, you have to negate, you either have to imbue reputation into it so that the degrees of trust are variable. So here's a human being. The system has proven through KYC that this human being is not a bot. It is proof of personhood. Let's say legal personhood. I'll talk to the differences between legal and natural personhood in a second. Proof of legal personhood. So I know this person has a birth certificate and they have a driver's license, passport. They are a citizen of New Zealand. They are who they say they are. And I can see their reputation here. They've got testimonials. They're rated 5 out of 5. And so by transacting with this human being, I have a degree of trust that is, let's say, 9 out of 10. I trust the system 100%, the digital system 100%, because it's on a distributed ledger. It's on a distributed network. I trust that 100%, and I trust the human being. They've got 5 out of 5 stars, but they've only got 10 trades or transactions. And so I'm not 100% convinced that I can trust this person. However, I'm a human being and I have my own risk profile, and my appetite for risk is unique to me based on my unique lens of perspective. And so I'm choosing to place my trust in this human being and in the system in order to fulfill this transaction. I've weighed up the pros and cons of what could happen if something went wrong, and I'm willing to take that risk. I'm a sovereign human being. I'm assuming the risk, you see. Now, let's say, great, that works. It's not trustless, but it has created the space within which I can apply my own risk profile as a human being, understanding that I am responsible for if something goes wrong because I'm fully aware of the risks. Now, the problem from the perspective of the community governing the centralized marketplace is that that's a barrier to transacting. And so they'll be wanting to optimize that over time. If they perceive that there is a barrier preventing transaction, then it's a barrier to generating revenue. And so they want to resolve that over time. And so let's look at that scenario. Let's say the exact same scenario happened again. The exact same person was wanting to be engaged with, but the person wanting to transact, their risk profile was different. Let's say they were slightly more risk averse, and even though they trust the system 100%, and even though the person they want to transact with is 5-star rated, and they've had 10 transactions, there's still an element of risk, and they have a 0 risk profile, so they're not prepared to transact. How do you solve this? So in this scenario, you're sovereign. You're an adult human being. If you want to transact, you want protection in case something went wrong, then you want it to be underwritten. You want that transaction to be underwritten, either by your own indemnity or, insurance, or if the community governing that centralized marketplace is smart, they will provide indemnity, and they will be the stewards of the regulatory standards that determine what's covered, what isn't, what are the criteria. Now, so let's apply that. Let's say the centralized marketplace, they've realized that they want to optimize the possibilities for transactions to take place. They've underwritten the transactions on the marketplace. They've developed their own criteria, and they've published their own standard. And they can prove that the person that the customer wants to transact with has met those standards, and they've proved their legal personhood. Now, let's say someone else's, a different customer is presented this time, and their risk profile was even worse. They're borderline paranoid. So they go through the criteria and they see gaps in the criteria. So their standards are higher than the standards that the community have developed themselves. And so regardless of whether this person is paranoid or not, it's still a barrier to transacting. The gaps in the criteria of the marketplace itself means that there is someone within the community that wants to transact that is unable. What do you do now? Well, that person either needs to then find an underwriter for the transaction, for maybe an insurance company, whatever it may be, who does have the criteria that meets their needs, and then they have to pay for it. And so having to pay for it may mean that it's not viable for them to then transact. So now what do? There is intent, and then there is a will to transact, but the inability to create trust is the barrier. So regardless of whether this person's paranoid or not, it doesn't matter. That they are paranoid. And so there's a block. There is, the ecosystem is incapable of meeting an unmet need. Doesn't matter what the reason is. This is nature that we live in. Nature is seeking to dissolve the barriers to the will of the being expressed and realized and actualized. So what do you do now? Well, you need a system that is trustless. This is where ternary thinking comes in. You need a system that is trustless, which means that the only way you're going to be able to do it is by removing human beings from the system. Because human beings came up with the regulatory framework. They developed the standard. They developed the criteria. And that criteria may not be high enough. It may not be rock solid enough. And if you over coddle as a regulator, if you go over the top, what happens is it has the opposite effect. Then it becomes too much of a barrier less people are able to meet the criteria, which makes the bucket smaller. It makes the community smaller. And so you sacrifice diversity. So the more open the criteria, the more inclusive, and the greater the diversity, the higher the risk. The more strict the criteria, the less the diversity, but there's less risk. And so you can't have your cake and eat it too. But for me personally, I believe that, I'm a proponent of an overt duty of care, meaning that, exposing the realities of everything up front and then placing the sovereignty and the power within the individual so that they're aware of all the risks before they take them, but they can apply their own appetite to risk. Understanding that they're prepared to lose it all, potentially, because of the risks that are posed. That's my preference, but the reality is we all have varying degrees of innocence and naivety. I don't really like to use the word naivety because innocence is an incredibly useful perspective to have, especially when you're innovating, because if you don't believe what's not possible, if you are unaware of what's not possible, then you're going to keep going. Whereby if you look into the past and you see that someone else tried this and they failed, you may not even begin to try. And I see this all the time as an innovation advisor, and the uniqueness of New Zealanders, because they haven't been exposed to global perspectives, is that they try a whole bunch of things that no other human being would ever attempt. And they hit immense barriers and obstacles along the way. But once they're so enmeshed in it, they just stay with it. And anyway, I don't want to go into that right now because that's a topic unto itself. So despite my perspective of, people taking ownership of their own risk profile, that's still not going to work. So the Holy Grail is maximum diversity. Well, absolute diversity, meaning all inclusive. Every human being on the planet can participate and will participate, and zero risk. Totally inclusive, zero risk. Now, is that possible? Is that possible given that in order to reduce risk, we need to have strict criteria, and strict criteria cuts a whole bunch of people out? We sacrifice diversity. As it stands now, is it possible? And this is where technology comes in. This is where trustless systems comes in. And so some of you are aware that I'm into ternary thinking. I just did a podcast on it recently. So ternary thinking says that, okay, we can have anything that we want because reality is binary, but existence is infinite. And so ternary thinking says that everything is possible, and the equal and opposite is also possible. So the Holy Grail is trustless, and applying ternary thinking, creating a trustless system is what enables it to be absolutely entrusted. Enables us to entrust it wholly. So, and if we can trust it wholly, that makes it all inclusive. If we can trust the system absolutely, then that's what makes it all inclusive, so everyone can participate, and that's what enables us to leverage the diversity, all of the diversity. And so how can we? Well, this is where we have to remove human beings from the equation and create a system that is entirely trusted. And the thing I'm most excited about currently is zero knowledge proofs. So as far as trusting a digital system goes now, using ternary thinking, how can we trust information on the servers? And blockchain solves that problem by fragmenting the databases and forming a blockchain. And the fragmentation is what enables us to have a singular source of truth. So that's ternary thinking applied to solving that problem. So cool, we can trust the back end information on the records. That problem solved. So how do we make the transactions trusted? A transaction not necessarily meaning money exchange, but an action or behavior that wants to take place on the network that is transitioning between, that is changing custody. I'm the custodian of this knowledge, this information, this asset, and I want to share custody. I want to transition custody. It doesn't matter what it is, but I want to do that on a trustless system. And so zero knowledge proofs, what they're doing now is they are leveraging blockchain technology in the form of smart contracts, whereby an algorithm is applied that enables proof of information, of custody of information or knowledge, without having to reveal the actual knowledge. And this is very, very interesting, because what that does is it enables you to have a component within the system that is digital, that is entirely trusted, but also anonymous, you see. So you could have a human being, so let's say, and let's call it an agent, a digital agent. We take that agent, and that agent is anonymous, and we decide to call it Joe. We call it Joe Smith. Joe Smith isn't a real person. Joe Smith is an astronaut, and we can make up any avatar we want, any backstory, any personality that we want, any visual representation of that we want. We can transact with Joe, the astronaut, and Joe doesn't even actually exist. However, we trust the transaction because of the nature of the wisdom and the knowledge that is encapsulated by the digital agent. And so here we come across another avatar, another persona, and it's a horse called Jeff. So Jeff the horse, Jeff the green horse. Now Jeff the green horse is a skin for the same digital agent. So we transact with Jeff the horse, and that transaction is trusted because Jeff was just a wrapper for the same digital agent that we used on the previous transaction. And this is what's possible. This is what's possible with zero knowledge proofs. Now, there are, some of you know, I work for the New Zealand government's innovation agency. I'm an innovation advisor. I work with founders in the Web3 and AI space. And there are founders working on this kind of stuff right now. And in fact, it's going way beyond this, where it's beginning to converge. So imagine a scenario within which, so one of the trends I'm seeing is that, we've got technologies such as Dfinity, which they're calling the internet computer. I strongly recommend looking into that if you're interested in these kinds of things. And the trend and the patterns that I'm seeing are that the unification of servers, the dependency on physical servers, server farms, all those kinds of things, it's getting pushed up more and more into virtual layers. And the drive is for nano transactions to get more and more fine and trusted over time, as close as possible to real-time transacting. And in the same way where if you look at a television screen and let's say its flicker rate is 60 hertz, meaning the LEDs are switching on and off, flickering at a rate of 60 hertz, so fast that at some point we can't see the flickering happening. But if you slowed it down to say, 5 hertz, there'd be a pause in between the flickering, on, off, on, off. If you speed it up fast enough, if those transactions become fine enough, eventually it is perceived as if there is no space in between the flicking of on and off. And this is how binary mimics something infinite. This is how binary, something deterministic, through the rapid switching on and off of something that is deterministic, creates the illusion of it being infinite, not having no beginning and no end. You see? In the same way, the technology is moving into the space whereby nanotransactions are becoming so rapid that eventually we won't perceive a gap in between the transacting, that it will seem as though it's in real time. Now, why this is interesting, it's beyond interesting, it's revolutionary, is once that is in place, then we have a scenario within which, we're in the space of digital terraforming, and in terms of mapping reality digitally, and even tracking it digitally, creating digital twins of the environment potentially down to an atomic level, or even beneath that are such high resolution that they're exactly mirroring reality in real time, or seemingly real time. We have a safe sandbox and scenario within which to conjecture. So we can come up with scenarios utilizing AI, which is predictive, and many models are developing into profoundly potent oracles. You have a scenario within which you can begin conjecturing the natural environment. If we were to introduce a new structure of governance into this nation, what could happen? And it begins playing out the scenarios, the alterations in human behavior, the impact on the environment, and this is what can be possible once this technology becomes, once the resolution is high enough. Now, the problem we have, so the barriers we have currently, trust is obviously one of them. How can we trust every single transaction? And how can we sustain the compute power that it takes to transact? So the challenge with blockchain currently is that a lot of it has dependencies on server farms. Those server farms, many of them are still powered by power plants that are burning fossil fuels. Not very good for the environment. And due to the nature of gas fees on networks and stuff like that, it's really expensive. It's really, really expensive. And however, there are founders in the New Zealand ecosystem. There's one in particular who has created a serverless blockchain. Now, the idea of a serverless blockchain obviously is something extremely aspirational. And I haven't seen evidence of it being built or evidence of it working yet, but lots of people, imagine a world within which it's possible. And so let's say it is possible and it has been done. And what you have is a scenario within which you no longer have a dependency on the fossil fuels of the power plants that are powering the servers, that are providing the compute power, that are enabling the transactions on the networks. And what that means is you can then push the function of the servers up into the device. Now, the obvious place for this to happen is on a smartphone. And in that scenario, if the resolution and if the efficiency of the transactions is to a degree that the compute power of the device and its storage is adequate to become, to replace a server as the node in the blockchain, then you have a scenario within which your smartphone becomes your own blockchain node. It becomes your physical and your digital agent. And so the digital agent that I was sharing with you before, the trusted digital agent, it belongs on your physical device. And so here you have a scenario within which you have something analog, you have something physical that is symbiotically bonded to something digital. Both are trusted because one of them is in your physical possession, the phone, and the other one is operated by a trustless system. And the two are symbiotic. They are codependent. Now, once you have the node on your phone, and the technology that in the blockchain space right now for using this in terms of like a digital wallet it's called a cold wallet, where the node is on your phone. And so if your phone's disconnected, phone's switched off, it's off chain, and you turn it back on, put it back on chain, and you're the total steward. But if you lose the phone, you're stuffed. Someone robs you, you've got the biometrics in the phone to cover you. And so, but, there are ways around that, as we know. That technology is limited as it stands. So, given that this is where it's heading, it's obviously very exciting. But, what it means is that if you have a whole bunch of human beings, so if you take the system I was talking about before where there are 1 billion users and they've all got smartphones, and so they've all got their own sovereign blockchain node, it's on their physical phone, they're walking around, nanotransactions are so fine and high resolution that there's a digital twin of that blockchain, of that human blockchain network being mapped in real time, the geolocation, everything around those human beings mapped in real time. Then you have something truly profound. And the human beings become nodes in a neural network. And in that scenario, what we have is we have a singular mind consisting of each individual human being a node within that mind. So it's a hive mind swarm. And in that scenario, we can collect the intelligence off of the phone with the user's permission, you see. So we can have sovereignty over our own intelligence because it's on our phone. We can turn it off, we can turn it on. That those biases and our behavior is stored on the device. And if we want to share it with the singular neural network, then that is a privilege to those who are receiving our knowledge and our wisdom. And so we can remunerate people for sharing their uniqueness, for sharing their intelligence. And so here we have a scenario within which the intelligence and the uniqueness of the intelligence of the human being is in their hands. It's under their stewardship, their custody, and a vehicle for monetizing that is in the system. And there are trusted agents that we have who are collectively responsible for monetizing the singular intelligence that's being harvested with the permission of the individual, you see. And so we share in that success together from the commercial success of the combined wisdom of the hive mind, of which we are all a singular component part. Now, this may sound sci-fi to you, but the technology exists now. It is just a matter of optimization of things that already exist now for them to become more and more efficient at something they are already doing right now before this becomes a reality. And so permission-based, trustless system and with sovereignty within the hands of the individual. And this completely disrupts the model of OpenAI currently as it stands, which is singular, which has scraped all the available public intelligence and is now commercializing it and centralizing that value for a singular entity that is not benefiting the human beings whose intelligence is still being harvested to train the model, you see. So this intelligence belongs in the hands and the stewardship of every human being on earth that chooses to participate, you see. And this is the model that we need. And if we don't disrupt this now, it'll be very, very difficult to claw back the wisdom that has been absorbed through osmosis into the model that now currently belongs to Microsoft, predominantly. Now, that may be acceptable to you. It's not something I'm particularly happy about. I think there's a better way to do it. And the technology to be able to do it is very, very close. Very close. So, I want to talk about a scenario with them. Let's say we've achieved this. The elephant in the room here is that if I'm a billionaire and my wallet or my wallets are stored on my physical phone and using a cold wallet system, using a trusted digital agent, that digital agent on my phone allows me to have perpetually mutable form. So let's say me as a human being, I've got 25 digital avatars or personas that I use to wrap around my singular digital agent. That singular digital agent is trusted And therefore, all 25 of my personas are trusted. And that's my virtual team. And so for me, I've spoken about this in other podcasts. I'm an audio engineer. I'm a web developer. I'm a workshop facilitator. I'm an innovation advisor. And I've got a different persona for each of those skill sets and attributes that I have. And I've got businesses running on the centralized marketplace and in the spatial web. The spatial web is an inevitable evolution of Web 2 and Web 3 kind of fused together out of this technology. And so I've got spatial websites, presenting my personas, the audio engineer, the DJ, all separate personas, but all sharing the same digital agent. And I'm happy. I'm deriving a viable sources of income from all those things. They're all going into my singular digital wallet stored on my phone. But let's say that becomes extremely successful. I've become a billionaire, and my physical phone, becomes an immensely valuable asset because it's got all of my wealth is stored on my phone. So what if I get mugged? And what if, the biometric security is based on my fingerprint, and someone chops my hand off and breaks into my phone, and they just have at it? Doesn't work. We can't have people walking around with phones that are worth potentially billions or trillions of dollars. That doesn't work. So this is where I see the evolution. And this is, I think, this is the shift in perspective and paradigm that I think a lot of human beings will struggle with, is that the biometric security that is inherently linked to a phone. I think it's inevitable that in time and gradually, and this is why the theme of trust, that's why that's the thread of this conversation, is because I think there will be a moment in time where there is a microchip within our physical human body that is mapped to our unique genetic code. And when that bond is broken, then it breaks the entire chain and renders the phone obsolete. And, a lot of people know about Neuralink, which is Elon Musk's venture, and it's about embedding microchips in the brain. And so this technology is not, well, the concept of it, it's not new. It's obviously not widespread, but what is the problem with that? It's trust. What if someone puts a microchip in my brain and usurps it and then all of a sudden controls me? Or what if they do it really covertly and they're inadvertently, they're subliminally transmitting, thoughts into my mind to give me ideas. And against my will or without me knowing. And so it's trust. Trust is the only way that's ever going to happen. Trust that the underlying technology and that the system, the digital system, is trustless. It's under the shared custody of we the people. It's not under the custody of a singular entity. That the stewards of it, those who we empower to speak on our behalf, those we empower to act on our behalf, are trusted by us. They're vetted. We agree that these are the people that we trust. And so the mechanism for the election process of those people. So we have to be able to get into that space. If we're ever going to have a microchip that can be utilized to enhance our capability and our capacity as human beings, whereby we can walk around with a phone, with a physical phone. It will probably shrink down into something the size of a credit card in time, let's be honest. And then that credit card will shrink down into a microchip, and that's actually inside our body. Trust that is built up and earned over time through grace and the gradual earning of trust in symbiosis with trustless systems. It's the only way, but it's the inevitable way to my mind. Now, along with, let's say there is a scenario within which we do have microchips in our brain. We do trust them. The whole thing's totally trustless. And there are significant additional capabilities and additional capacity we can derive from that. And so the thing we used to fear the most in a scenario within which we were devoid of trust, someone usurping the network, someone imbuing, someone putting in thoughts that are not our own and ideas that are not our own. Imagine how we would be able to reprogram and rewire our own neural networks if we could intentionally put in thoughts that are inspirational, that are causing us to rewire and reprogram our minds and our brain towards, success, triumph, joy, peace, whatever it may be. There may be a scenario within which we move into that space over time, gradually and progressively, using our own discernment and our own will to decide whether or not, through our own permission, we're ready to trust a certain component of that progression along the way. And there may be a scenario within which, in time, that we are all physically and digitally connected, working in true symbiosis together as one, as a singular hive mind of human beings that trust ourselves enough to trust a trustless system. And in truth, I am of the mind that this journey is about trusting our own discernment above everything else. If you have a fear of the wrath of your own judgment that's causing you or preventing you from making choices in your life that will enable you to make progress, this will be a challenge for you. But by the end of that journey, you will have come to trust yourself so much that the projection of your external world, the reflection of it, will reflect to you how much trust that you have in yourself with a trustless system, working symbiotically with your own judgment. And this is the vision I've held for a ternary system, an over-unity system that has a dependency on something analog, which is the human being. But that human being acts as a circuit breaker between, becoming the node within a system that is otherwise trustless. And I think the beginning of this process, some of you may know that there are computer chips being developed now using human neurons. And they're trying to solve the problem that they are inaccurate because they're non-binary. They're not, so they're non-deterministic. And so they're non-quantized, which makes them not extremely inaccurate, but quite inaccurate. However, that inaccuracy is the beginning of a way we can begin to imbue randomness into a system, because the inaccuracy of it is what makes it unpredictable. And so that's the beginning of a way that we can begin to, avert quantum cryptography, whereby, currently we use non-deterministic randomness in cryptography. We use deterministic randomness in cryptography, and I think that will be the beginning of non-deterministic randomness within a binary system. But I'm not sure about the ethics around human neurons in a computer chip. I'm still not sure about how I feel about that. However, I do understand the concept and the potential benefits, but yeah, not sure how I feel about that yet. Anyway, so trust. It's everything. If you trust something enough, you will defer your authority to it. It's that simple, because of the potential for it to enhance your life. It's all about trust. If you are devoid of trust, then you will hold on to all of your authority. You will not give any of your power away if you do not trust the custodian, the person you are transferring an obligation to. If you cannot trust that person, you will remain independent for the rest of your life. And some people think that's a good thing, but the most independent person on the planet, they have freedom, but they don't have quality of life because they are responsible for every aspect of their own care, you see. You have to do all the cooking, all the cleaning yourself. You have to do your own accounting. You have to pay your own bills. You have to be a solo entrepreneur, operator. You have to do everything yourself. Independence is to me is pure hell. What we want interdependence, so that we can leverage the full diversity of the full gamut of potential, and so we can enhance our own capability and capacity to experience the richness of life. And the only issue with being dependent and interdependent is how much we trust those who are willfully taking on the obligations that we are deferring our authority to them through. If we don't trust them, then we don't trust life. And there's nothing worse than walking around paranoid that something's going to happen. It's always related to our capability and capacity to trust the stewards of our care. Okay. So I think I'll leave it there. This has been a pretty deep one. I may elaborate on it, components of it, but we'll see how it goes. So that's it for now for The Nature of Trust. Cheers for now.